fancied making a kind of a white lasagna. Now, white lasagna's normally got chicken in it. I'm not going to be doing that today. I'm going to make a vegetable one. Actually, it's going to be white and green lasagna, probably. Now, it should be noted, I'm not following any kind of recipe here. I'm just making this up as I go along. This is not an official lasagna recipe, so if you're wondering where I got this from, I just pulled together a bunch of stuff. I'm making this with what I happen to have to hand. The first thing we're going to need is some greens. I've actually got them cooked already here, but let's go out in the garden and see where those came from. So for this recipe, we're going to be picking some of this strawberry spinach, which Jenny's planted. And you can see this is rather overgrown with weeds. So we're actually going to pick some of these weeds as well, because some of it is chickweed, which is quite edible. However, there's a cautionary note on that, which I will show you about just now. Now we'll have to be a little bit careful about how I get in here, because our vegetable garden is quite densely packed. We've got a small space, so we have to maximise that by really packing things in. Now this bit, if you're wondering, is to keep Doggo out, because she loves to dig. So I think with this stuff, I'm actually going to cut out the tops here, and that might encourage it to bush out a little bit and produce more leaves at the bottom. These bits are edible, these are the seeds. Later on these develop into sort of like strawberry-like looking things, but not strawberry flavoured. But the whole thing is edible. I'm going to leave a few of them, but also we'll pick some of these leaves. It's a kind of pick as much as you like type of crop, so I'll just pick a little bit from all of them. We've also got beetroot behind me here, which we could have used some of the thinnings of, but that might stain the pasta dish I'm thinking of making. Anyway, this plant is quite closely related to goosefoot and good King Henry, which I've picked, foraged and eaten before. Right, these weeds. So this is chickweed, but in amongst it is growing another weed that you really don't want to pick, which is right here, sunspurge. And I'm going to show you the difference between those two plants. So that's chickweed, I know that's good. I'm going to put that in my basket. The easiest way to identify it actually is when it's growing like this, is it has these little starry white flowers on it, which is pretty unmistakable. So side by side here, a young plant of chickweed on your left here and sunspurge on your right. And you can see without the flowers, they do look kind of similar, don't they? And if you just went in there and grabbed handfuls of stuff, you would be bound to get some sunspurge in there. Now, what's so bad about that? Well, chickweed is just edible, it just tastes like spinach, it's just a leafy green vegetable. Sunspurge, I'm going to have to wash my hands after I show you this, has this milky sap. This milky latex in here, if you get that in your mouth, you'll get blisters on the inside of your mouth. It's kind of okay unless you've got very sensitive skin on your hands. It's okay to get this on your hands, not okay to get it in your mouth. If you've got this stuff on your hands and then rubbed your eyes, it could cause really severe damage and it could actually lead to blindness. So not a plant to be trifled with, sunspurge, but it grows so well here that I can't control it other than just ignoring it. Anyway, we're not picking sunspurge today, we're picking chickweed. This is why I tend to favour the slightly larger plants, because chickweed has these little starry flowers, and actually if you look really closely, usually you can see there's like a little line of hairs up one side of the stem. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that in the video, but if you look closely you can find it. So chickweed's quite easy to identify and quite easy to tell apart from sunspurge as long as you're careful and just attentive. And I mention this really not to put people off the idea of wild food foraging, but just really as a cautionary note, because quite often in the videos you'll see me very casually picking things, or what seems to be quite casually picking things, and I don't always explain how careful I'm really being. Because a lot of it's kind of ingrained as habit for me, so I don't always remember to explain exactly what I'm up to. And while we're out here, I'm just going to have a nice big sprig or two of winter savoury, which goes really well with beans. and some of my Turkish thyme. What I'm going to do with this chickweed that I've picked is just plunge the whole lot into cold water. I'm going to let it soak there for about half an hour, because it's quite a low growing plant and it does suffer a little bit with soil splash. That will loosen up anything stuck on there, and in a minute we'll rinse it and give it a proper wash. And I'll do the same with these leaves and flowers of strawberry spinach, because again, even though this is carefully picked, it's quite a low growing plant. We had some heavy rain last night and some soil will have splashed up onto the leaves. So I've got my herbs here, got winter savoury, thyme, and I did actually pick, I didn't get it on camera, a few leaves of sage as well. Going to make my own pasta for this lasagna, and I'm just going to use for that, well, I'm going to start with about a cup of regular plain flour. Nothing fancy, no special pasta flour, just ordinary plain flour. Little pinch of salt and 1 egg. Going to work that together. I may need to add some more flour, so just going to work that together, and as soon as it feels dry enough I'm going to get my hands in there and work it together. I reckon we might have actually chanced on the right mixture of flour and egg. Let's have a look. Just going to get my hands in there and give it a really good squeeze together and press it down into the dry flour to try to get it to take up that flour into the mixture. Now that might seem like a bit of an unpromisingly dry dough, but when we run that a few times through the pasta machine, it's going to be fine. Yeah. Going to make a cheese sauce, so I've got a little bit of butter. I haven't actually got any butter left, so I'm going to use butter and olive oil. And there's about 2 tablespoons full of fat in the pan there. And then into here about an equal amount of flour. So about a couple of tablespoons. You'll know if you got it right. We're making a roux, and that roux is a little bit loose. So before it starts to cook, just going to add a touch more flour. That's about right. It could be a bit stiffer than that, but that'll be fine. I'm just going to let that fry and sizzle for a little bit before we add the milk in. And then in with about 200 ml of milk there. And I'll just gently heat that until that thickens, and then I'll just add small amounts of milk until it stops thickening. And because we're making a cheese sauce here, mustard helps to enhance the flavour of cheese. All I have is whole grain mustard, so that's what we're using. About a level teaspoonful. Mustard has a weird kind of synergy thing with cheese. It makes the cheese taste more cheesy in a cheese sauce. So I can see that sauce has started to thicken now. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit so I can keep it under control. And at this point, I'm also going to add in a nice grind of fresh nutmeg. Because cheese, well, a creamy sauce with nutmeg in it, especially with spinach, is really good. And so I'm going to get that in there now so that has a chance to infuse into the sauce. A tiny bit more. So we're up to, 450 ml of milk or so, which I think is about the right amount. We're going to add cheese to this obviously in a moment. That will increase the volume some more. I don't want the cheese to overpower the spinach and herbs in the sauce, so I've got about 100 grams of mature cheddar here, which is not a huge amount of cheese, but it's certainly enough to make this a nice cheesy sauce. For combining it into the sauce, you can grate it. I always just chop it into little cubes like this. Put those into the hot cheese sauce. Just keep them moving, and they will just melt and dissolve into the sauce. Takes a little bit longer than if you use grated cheese, but I find that easier than grating a big chunk of cheese. While that's just melting in, I'm going to chop up my herbs because they're going to go in the sauce too. Take another look at this sauce and we can see, yep, the cheese is nearly all gone now. And then in go those herbs. And now I'm going to take that off the heat and let that stand. It will thicken a little bit more, so I might need to give it some more milk. But now we can prepare the pasta and the other parts of the dish. Just got a medium-sized onion here and a couple of cloves of garlic that I'm going to chop up. And then this onion is going to go in a big pan, and there's a reason why I've got a big pan, which I'll explain in just a moment. So big frying pan, low heat, bit of olive oil, and in with the onions, and some bits of herb that happen to be stuck on the board. If the lighting conditions in this video seem a bit strange to you, It's because there's a thunderstorm brewing. It's only about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's nearly as dark as evening outside because there's a massive black cloud looming. So if there's a sudden noise in a moment, it could well be thunder or the dog barking at thunder. Wash time now for these greens, so I'm just going to dump them out into a colander. We can see some of what we actually washed off there, which is mostly dirt, but interestingly, you do get some little brown chickweed seeds in there as well. And when washing chickweed for culinary use, I actually find it much more effective to run another bowl of water, give it a really good swish inside that water, like that, and allow the dirt to kind of sink to the bottom, and then lift out the weeds. That, in my experience, is more effective than washing it under running water. So I'll do that probably 3 times, and I think we'll probably find now that all we find in the bottom of this third water is just those little brown seeds. Yeah, so there's no dirt coming out now, just a few of those little chickweed seeds in the bottom there. Now before I cook this, I am just going to go through it once again, just pick right through it, leaf by leaf, make sure I haven't got anything in there that I don't want to eat. So there wasn't very much dirt on that spinach, but I will give it another rinse, just because gritty greens are not nice. So that's my greens prepared. I'm not very worried at all that they're wet. In fact, I need that. And I have had to turn on the kitchen lights here, so apologies for the adjustment of lighting. You wouldn't think it's 3 in the afternoon in the middle of summer, would you? It's nearly the longest day, and it's nearly the darkest day. How about that? Anyway, in with those spinach leaves. In with that chickweed. I'm just going to move it around and let it kind of wilt in the heat of the pan here. It does shrink down a lot because that's what spinach and leafy greens do. That's enough. Literally just needs to be cooked long enough to wilt everything down. And the green stuff, I'm just going to get out onto a board now. So I'm just going to clank the knife through that just to make sure that we haven't got any long stems in there, because I need to spread this around a bit. So we'll just put that into a cold bowl, which will help to prevent it from overcooking. So in terms of ingredients, we've got our cooked chickweed and spinach and onions and garlic. We've got the dough, which I made. We've got this nice cheese and herb sauce. And there's one more thing, which is going to be butter beans. Or I think if you live in some other parts of the world, this might be lima beans or lima beans. They're just a nice big bean, and we're going to put them into the lasagna as well, because it's another flavour and texture element, and it's going to be really nice in here, I think. These butter beans already cooked in the can. And of course you could do this with any kind of beans, and you could cook them from dry beans. I'm just doing this really for convenience. And I'm tipping away all of the juice that's in there, the aquafaba, or whatever you want to call it. I really only want the beans. My dough, which has been resting now for probably half an hour, is actually nice and pliable now, although it's still a little bit on the crumbly side. But watch what happens when this goes through the pasta machine. Just going to take half of it, massage it into a relatively flat piece, and then we'll just go through here. The first time it's going to crumble, because this pasta roller is not just rolling it thin, it's compressing the flour grains together with the liquid that's in the dough and making it pliable. So it's a bit messy to start with, but the more we roll it, the less it will tear, and the more it will start to hang together. There we go, it's coming together into a smooth dough now. So just need to keep on fold and roll. And I'm going to start dialing down the thickness so that we can draw this out into a thinner sheet of dough. I don't care at all that the edges of this dough are ragged or that it's messy or anything like that, because it's going to go into layers inside here, and I'm making this mainly for flavour and texture and so on, not for Instagram. Good, so we're starting to get that together. I think we'll go to number 7. I don't want to go too thin, or else there'll be no pasta ready to bite into. Yeah, that's plenty thin enough. So in terms of assembling this, it really is going to be a case of, I've got a layer of pasta in there already because I didn't have the camera running. We'll just have a green layer here, a little bit of that sauce on there. To get the pasta into the right places, which I should have shown you already, but the camera wasn't rolling, I'm just literally laying it in there like that and then cut it with scissors. It is as crude and simple as that, as far as I'm concerned, because I'm not trying to make this look perfect. I'm just trying to make it taste hearty. Just make sure we haven't got any pasta stuck to the edges there. Okay, so we had a green layer, let's have a bean layer. And sauce again. A bit more pasta. And again, I'm just going to rough it in there. Now we want another green layer. Probably could have evened that out a little bit more, but we are where we are now. Can't go back. That layer won't need quite as much sauce, so I'm just going to put a few little bits on there like that. Last bit of pasta. No, second to last bit of pasta. Doesn't matter if they overlap in the middle because I've rolled this pasta quite thin. Last of the beans. Last layer of pasta. Last little bit of the cheese sauce is going to go on the top here. So I'm just going to paint that over the top layer of pasta there. So, lid on, and I'll chill that down in the fridge now for a little while because there's a couple more things to go on there before we go in the oven. So just to finish off assembly of this lasagna, I've got some homegrown basil. I'm just going to tear on a few leaves of that. Just really to continue the whole green and white theme, layers. Oh, that smells good. And then I've got some nice mozzarella here, fresh mozzarella. I'm going to cut that into really thin slices, as thin as I can go really without it crumbling or falling apart. And I'm going to layer that on the top. There we go. Save the rest of that for another day. And then finally, just some hard Italian cheese. Now this is literally, I don't know what variety of cheese this is because the shop just sold it as hard Italian cheese. So it's kind of a bit like pecorino or parmigiano or something like that, but obviously not famous enough to be sold under its own name. So it's just Italian hard cheese. So just to give that cheese a little taste. Lots and lots of flavour in that cheese. Quite salty, which is why I didn't go overboard with salt during the assembly and sauce making and so on. Very easy to add salt at the table, very hard to take it out of the dish. My oven's preheated to 180 Celsius. I'm going to put that in on a tray for probably half an hour. So now there's just time to go and make a cup of tea, and I'm going to sit and watch the rain for a bit. And I reckon that's about done. 45 minutes total baking time that was in the end. It can't be eaten at the moment like that. It's like cheesy napalm. So we're going to let that rest for probably half an hour and it will sink back down. Some of these fats that have come out of the cheeses will soak back in. I think actually that might be olive oil from the frying of the onions actually. So let's just leave that, and then half an hour from now we'll dish up with a bit of salad. Half an hour or so has passed and this is now still hot, but hopefully cool enough that we can serve it up and eat it without scalding. Nearly came out in one piece. So all those layers are nicely cooked in there. It's not so cooked that the spinach has lost its green, which is great. Just going to have a little bit of assorted salad stuff on the side. Tiny bit of olive oil over that salad. So what's it actually like? Let's give it a taste. Crispy top bit and all of those layers. I'm making sure I've got a bean in there as well. Let's give that a taste. All those little stems from the chickweed are like little crunchy, crispy bits inside of there. And That spinach, and probably the chickweed as well, is just deliciously earthy and nutty in there. Quite a lot of herbs went in there, but actually they're quite subtle and well balanced in there. And the nutmeg in that milky sauce, just enough there to give it a really nice boost. I don't think that needs any more salt, but I will take a bit of pepper. And it's just had enough time for that mozzarella to cool and go stringy and chewy on top. So there we go, that's my recipe for green and white spinach lasagna. I hope that's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.